Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and thank you kindly for joining us on Real Talk with Keith Smith. We are live in downtown Charlottesville, our studio on Market Street in the Macklin Building, a show that airs wherever you get your social media and your podcasting content, a program that's dynamic where you, the viewer and listener, can help shape the conversation. We've been talking about decoupling of commissions and this National Association of Realtors settlement that has been the talk of real estate, certainly here in Charlottesville, Albemarle, and in Central Virginia. We have two folks on set today that need no introduction. Still, I'm going to make an introduction regardless or nevertheless. Katie West is in the house. I believe this is either her second or third rodeo on set and in studio of Charlottesville Settlement Company. Bill Tucker of Tucker Griffin Barnes is in the house. He likes to go by Tucker. I learned that today. Both these folks are the best at what they do, and I can say that with confidence and conviction. Judah Wickhauer, my friend, if you can go to the studio camera and welcome the always distinguished, the always affable and approachable Keith Smith.
I pay him to say that.
How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Doing great. It's not raining out, folks.
It's beautiful.
This big yellow thing is out in the sky, and we're going to have a little bit of sun today. So I want to just kind of kick off a little bit and do a very brief PSA, public service announcement here, right? So
nicely done.
You didn't like that, huh? Well, PSA for gentlemen over a certain age means something else. Completely something else. So I just wanted to clarify that we're going to do a public service announcement.
Yeah, I just tightened up when you said that.
I know. Tucker.
Yeah, we will talk about real estate. Or, turning cough. It could be.
Real estate.
It could be. Okay. So let me get back.
Says stay on point.
Let me get to, because Smith goes sideways every once in a while. So let's get back to the public service announcement. I've had phone calls from multiple clients, multiple real estate agents. This clickbait that's out there that says all of a sudden on July something, homes are going to be 6% cheaper. Things are going to drastically change. And we're going to talk about this with the pros on the back end of it. But on the front end of it, commissions have always been negotiable, right? Nothing has changed there. But what has really changed is this decoupling. And what that means is that starting sometime in July, that the listing agent cannot put in the MLS how much the compensation will be for the buyer's broker. That does not mean it's going to go away. We were talking pre-production chat. Pacific Northwest has done this in 2022, and it hasn't gone away, right? It's been kind of stabled. So, there's no panic here. What we need to do is work through how we're going to do this as an industry, as a community to move forward. There's three things that you should have always been able to do in my business. Show your value proposition. You better be good at that. Be transparent on how we do business, and be able to communicate. If you could do those three things, the world isn't ending. We're just changing a little bit, and we're just going to operate at a different level. And of course, I'm getting phone calls already. Didn't even take that long.
And their fans are already out. Stephanie Wells Rhodes of the Interstate family. Good morning, Bill and Katie. This is Stephanie from American Pest and Intrastate Service Company. And as Bill would know, Cameron's sister. Can't wait to see you guys on today's talk show. You have 7 real estate firms watching you guys right now.
So what I wanted to talk about here is how this goes on, how you guys see this happening when it gets to your table, right? When it gets to the end, when it gets to the closing. There's a lot of what ifs. We don't really know, so we're going to kind of play some scenarios here to move forward. But just quickly, from a high level, you guys are pros. You do a lot of transactions. What do you think come July when you have closings that are going to be different in July than today? Does that make any sense, that question?
Sure, Keith. And one of the things
I prefer to be called Smith, by the way.
Smith?
No, I'm only Keith. Yeah.
Is the real estate commission disbursement statement. That's now going to change.
Yeah.
Because right now you maybe just get one that's lists the commission for both agents. And so now, if with decoupling, you may have a buyer that's got a different, their own commission agreement with the buyer, and the seller's got his commission agreement. So we're probably going to be looking at 2 different commission statements. And we got to look at them carefully. In the past, sometimes we don't get them, and we just assume 6%, and typically that's
Back up for a second. You say you sometimes don't get them?
Yeah, I'm amazed that we don't.
We
Sometimes
won't
we
close
don't get
without
them.
one.
But
Pardon?
We won't close without
yeah,
one.
There you go.
none of us will. But
That hearing aid picked that one up.
but you've got to go ahead prior to closing and have a CD that you've approved with the lender. So you've got to guess at some number, even though you don't have the commission. We'll all wait to get the statement before we actually finish. But now it's going to be more important than ever that those statements come in from both agents.
What if it's in the contract?
Well, then we still want a commission disbursement statement.
So for those of us that are not in the industry, what happens, both sides sends a disbursement to the closing agent,
Yep.
so that is clearly on what's getting dispersed and when.
Well, and plus it includes other things like the, some expense that the realtor paid. HOA, they paid for the
EMD
HOA or
whatever, if they
something.
happen to hold it.
So,
Or a home warranty, that
Right.
kind of thing. So the Pacific Northwest decoupled, and the way that they decoupled in 2022, and the way they did this, which we now do in the state of Virginia, have been doing it since 2012. There's a buyer-broker agreement, right? And you have a listing agreement, and what they did is they wrote into the contract, like commercial transactions are, that the listing side gets X eggs, whatever it is, the buyer side get Y eggs. Do you see that propagating itself into the contracts coming forward?
I think it would be very helpful. I think that you have to do something to protect the realtors that are out there, because you work so hard to get these deals to the table, to get to the end and not get paid because somebody didn't do something. If it's in the contract, then it's clear.
What do you think about the lenders? How the lenders are going to look at that?
Well, it's going to depend on how tight someone is on cash. And especially when you're doing an FHA, you can only get 3% closing cost, and you pretty much need those for the closing costs. So if you're having to pay realtor commissions on top of that, that's going to be a problem.
So what's our workaround, guys?
Yep. Well, you know what I see before we get there is I see another VAR contract revision.
Yeah, I've been saying that for the last few shows. I think you're going to see between now and July what these forms we have on our table here getting amended a little bit on it. We're actually talking internally in our shop to actually start including this now as an amendment to the contract, start addressing that now and trying to get a little bit ahead of the curve on that. On it. Your office is calling me, by the way.
Logan Wells
It must be a
Clalo.
transaction we're doing.
But
Literally, it's Sarah Whalen is calling me from your office.
But at the end of the day, they say that the sellers are going to pay, less because they aren't paying the commission for the buyer's broker. At the end of the day, it's going to be rolled into that sales price somehow. It's not going to change anything.
So I had a couple of emails, and I'll kick off with this, and it may be somewhat of an obvious answer, but multiple agents emailed me, and I'm going to boil it down to this question, right? All right, I have a buyer-broker agreement. I've done my job. I have it's decoupled. I've done this one-time showing agreement. They've signed it. The seller has signed it, agreed to a percentage of eggs. I'm representing the buyer. We put an offer into the table to the seller, and in the contract, we write, this is what the compensation is going to be. My buyer now just signed that contract, and the seller now crosses everything out. The question that I'm being asked is, what is my obligation at that point? Am I obligated to continue to work with that buyer? Or what is my next step at that point? Did I just now, as a buyer, sign on to something that I'm working for free? Does that make any sense?
Constitute a counteroffer if they cross things out?
Well, it is in the contract stage, but what Keith's worried about is, from the realtor standpoint, is they've got to still continue to represent their client.
That's exactly right.
Their
'Cause I've got
ethics.
this buyer-broker agreement. I've agreed to this.
Right.
Right.
But in your buyer-broker agreement, won't it be changed to list that
Well,
there'll be
it is. It's changed.
and it's got a commission in it,
It's
saying
changed.
that I, the buyer, will pay you a 3% or whatever commission.
What if they don't have it? Right?
Well, then they ought to be language in these, again, I'm talking about another revision, that would say, in the event that the seller doesn't pay commission to me, I agree as a buyer that I owe you a commission of X.
So,
Wouldn't that work?
well, it's kind of in it already, right? It says that. So the buyer-broker agreement, if you do it right, you'll have all this in it.
Right.
But it's a practical thing, right? You asked me to negotiate with Bill, right? We raised the price. We did what we needed to do. We negotiated it. We put it in that. And the contract is handed to Bill, and Bill crosses it out.
But just like when the seller comes back and wants more earnest money, or changes the sales price, or refuses to include the refrigerator or whatever, that constitutes a counteroffer. So at that point, you have a counteroffer.
I understand that, but now my buyer says, I want this house, I'm signing the contract.
Right, but the buyer has also signed an agreement with you, the agent, to pay you a commission if he doesn't get one from the seller. So the buyer, when that counteroffer comes in, the buyer needs to understand that if the seller isn't going to pay any of the commission, I, the buyer, have already agreed to pay some in the buyer-broker agreement.
Value
Right.
proposition, you got to transparency and communication. Make sure the buyer understands what they've
Yep.
signed. But I see and these agents that have been emailing me see a possibility that I've committed to work to this person. This person doesn't have this money. They've just signed the contract because I've got to present that offer, even though it's a counter. I've got to present that, and that buyer signs it, and they don't have the money to pay me. Short of suing the buyer, which I don't see anybody doing, I've just worked for free.
Or you're going to expect to get paid in the future because you've got a contract that's in writing that's valid for 5 years.
Oh, explain that.
Well, statute of limitations
Got it.
on a written document is 5 years.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, the buyer could compensate his representation after they've closed, moved into the house, and as cash flow or cash reserves have improved? Is that what you're saying?
Well, sure, because again, there's this contract that I've agreed to pay you, the Realtor, 3%, or
Making
whatever the
something
number
up.
is.
That's an interesting wrinkle that hasn't been discussed right there.
That and what you just said, the note. And the third thing, as I'm breaking off my old...
Because that would help the buyers that are potentially cash strapped at closing, especially with the 3% down that Katie was talking about.
Yeah.
That's an interesting wrinkle.
So
right
you would document...
No representation wants that, though.
Yeah, you would document it with a promissory note,
Yeah.
is what I would do.
So we get to that situation.
Interesting.
And the buyer wants to buy, can't pay us. We're going to do a promissory note. We're going to attach it to the property?
Well, then no, I wouldn't do that because it's a deed of trust, and
Yeah.
that's
But
the lender's,
promissory note
lender
would make
probably
them
isn't
pay
going to
you.
be
And
happy
what
with
is a
that.
promissory note worth?
It's worth enough to go to court if
There
you
you
don't get
Yeah,
paid.
you could get a
So
judgment.
we're ending
against them.
ending up in court no matter what.
Why couldn't you put it attached to the property in the second position?
Well, you could, but you wouldn't want to record that right at this contemporaneously with the closing.
Because that would scare off the lender.
So Bill's 1,000% right, and we've been talking about this on the show for a while. VAR, Virginia Realtors, they need, and I'm sure they're doing this, I hope they are anyway, their lawyers are digging into this and what this new contract is going to look like to help avoid this exact example. I had literally 24 emails. agents
Isn't
asking.
another solution going to be down the road where the feds get involved and they say, we're going to include this buyer commission that the buyer has to pay as part of what we're going to allow under the mortgage?
I agree 100%. I think you're going to see the regulators between now and then, and I'm working on a round table of lenders to talk about this, that I think you're 100% right. I think you're going to see all, and I think, look, I've been very critical of NAR, the way they handled this, and I've publicly said it. I've got literally dozens of agents calling me all upset about it. I think what they did smartly about it is give us time. So you've got till July, and I'll be honest with you, Bill, we're going to get a phone call from me in the next couple of days anyway. Might as well do it now. We're working on amendments and addendums to the contract now. We can't wait for that to happen or may not happen. And we're really starting to tackle this. So we're going to have to buy some of your time to help us do that, or whoever you decide to use in your office.
This is an interesting question that's come in from a real estate investor. What does the panel see or think are the top 3 most pressing challenges or hurdles that need to be cleared, say, in the next 6 months to 12 months?
Ladies first.
Great. Thank you, Tucker. I would say that between inventory and interest rates are our 2 biggest things, because both of those things are hurting the market as a whole, because the inventory is not there and the interest rates are so high and the prices are not going down. And I think and even when we have a break in the interest rates, then the prices are going to go up. So you're it's kind of a double-edged sword, so to speak. So really inventory, I guess, is the big thing.
Well, that at one point was a banned word on the set, inventory. But this is kind of why I did the PSA in the beginning. I mean, there's actually people out there because of this clickbait, right? You know, that has this, prices are going to be reduced and all this stuff. But if you click on that and read the article, it's never about the percentage of eggs. It's always about the decoupling. It's always about something else. In the state of Virginia, really the only thing we need to focus on is the decoupling, because we have a buyer-broker agreement. That's been a requirement from 2012.
I think what you said before, we've got the forms at the beginning when you're first meeting with your client, your client, if it's a buyer or the seller, the forms have got to be signed, got to be cleared, and it got to communicate to that seller or that buyer, this is what the expectations are, this is what you're agreeing to, and you may, end up owing me a commission because the seller may not be paying it. But it needs to be clearly communicated.
And that's number 3 on my top 3 things, right? It's value prop, transparency, and be able to communicate to everybody and how to do that. Look, we've all worked through some very tough transactions together. Communication is always key, and how to get together. Yonna wanted me to ask you this question, Bill, and I knew the answer to it, but I wanted to put it on the table. Back to this scenario that we did. Is there a mechanism to do something similar to a mechanic's lien on the property?
Well, and you have a lender from CNF, the branch manager, Bill Hamrick, saying that promissory note idea will give us lenders heart failure. Absolute heart failure.
We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that today.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and again, one of the issues we haven't touched on is at the end, we're communicating with the lender through a CD, a closing disclosure. I thought I turned this guy off.
Your fans are seeing you on the show right now.
Yeah. Excuse me, folks. I don't even know how to say
For those
that.
who didn't see that, he just handed the phone off to Katie to figure out.
I swear I turned it off to start with.
Go ahead, Bill, finish.
Remind me of the question.
You were talking about communicating with the lender through a CD.
Yeah, so we are communicating with the lender, giving them all the closing costs.
And by CD, I think you mean commission disbursement statement.
No, it's closing disclosure.
Oh, okay,
This
thank
is
you.
listing
We've got all
all,
kinds of CDs.
I see that.
this is listing
like
all
PSA?
the costs related to
Kinda.
the closing.
Okay.
So that lender looks at that and approves it, and then we go ahead and finish the closing. So the issue in my mind is, if we've agreed, if the buyer has agreed to pay $5,000 to the seller, to the realtor, that needs to be on the CD if that $5,000 is being paid at that time. If it's not being paid at that time because you've got this outside contract, then the issue is, does the lender need to be aware of that? If the contract's going to have that language in it from the get-go, the lender's going to be aware of it from the get-go that there's going to be this commission paid by the buyer. So it's going to be on the CD. So we've got to have lenders that figure a workaround to allow that to happen.
Which they're only can do as much as what the regulators are allowing them to do.
Exactly. So what happens if they've agreed to it, it's on the contract, but now at closing they don't have the money? So
Well, that's the
Lender's not
essence,
gonna
that's
get
the,
it-
that's
let
the
it get
essence
that.
of the conversation, of the question.
exactly. So how are we going to do that with this lender saying, we don't want to know about that promissory note, but it's already in the contract, lender. It's already been disclosed that buyer owes $5,000.
I think the lender's going to decline the loan because they're going to say they
At the
don't
last
have the
minute.
money.
At the last minute.
They don't have the money to pay what they've agreed to
Yes.
in this contract.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah, could
And
be.
I think the lender will deny
Which
the
only
loan at
makes-
that point.
Which
It's
only
more
makes
complicated.
Oh,
these
yeah.
realtors that are emailing me even more nervous, because now all of a sudden we get to the table, it's like, you know, if we're representing a buyer, the first thing I say, don't buy a new car, don't spend any cash, right? You know, don't go out and buy new furniture, because your debt to income ratio could change at the last minute at the table and you can't close. This is another scenario like that.
But I think they're going to catch it earlier in the process because the lenders go through those contracts and they know what kind of cash to close they're going to need. And they're going to catch that probably in underwriting at bare minimum and say, this person doesn't have enough cash. They haven't shown enough assets to be able to close this loan. Denied.
So before
Ricardo Cruz Duran watching, he's a lender. From a lending perspective at Total Mortgage, we currently do not have an official statement. We're waiting for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's official statement. But rest assured, we will be doing anything we can to help out the buyers. We strongly agree that in today's real estate market, buyers need all the help possible from all the ways possible, from all the allies possible. Ricardo Cruz Duran, congratulations on the new job. Comments are coming in fast and furious. Keith, jump in with your thought.
Yeah, so I wanted to make a suggestion to our two guests. You guys are saying some awesome stuff. We get a little closer to the microphone so people, not
sorry.
you know, just a little closer, Bill, so people can hear you're a soft-spoken guy. You're not from Brooklyn and loud and obnoxious like me. So, you know, you want to get a little closer to it.
Richmond, Short Pump, Crozet,
Go.
Ivy, Keswick, Arlington, McLean, Northern Virginia, folks outside Nashville watching the program right now. This comment comes in from Danville, Travis
Hey,
Hackworth,
Travis.
about the inventory issue. We have the same in Danville like everywhere else. There's been a shortage of good housing stock that people want and doesn't require a lot of renovation. He talks about some of these projects finally coming online as well. This from a first-time home buyer. He says the promissory note, Jonathan watching the program, he's watching in Belmont. He says the promissory note is a good idea for those of us that are using all our money for our down payment and are stretched thin in today's market. The promissory note, though, is not something that's been discussed. How could I have this conversation with my representation and my lender? So you guys may be putting something here into the ecosystem of Central Virginia with this idea. Just prepare yourselves for this.
Oops.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. I mean, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to, you know, this is four people around a table having a cup of coffee or a tea, trying to figure out how our world is going to start changing. We want to help people, right? This is what we do for a living, and we're just trying to get some good information out there.
But Keith, if you're the realtor, I'm going to counter my own idea for the promissory note. If you're the realtor and you've worked hard, which we know you do, to get this deal to close, and all you're going to get is a promissory note at the end and maybe a promise to be paid.
Yeah, so
That's-
and when you were
That's a
saying
little
it, my
sketchy.
thinking
Yeah.
was, you know, this may end up just chalking off at the cost of business.
Well, and to
move
add
on.
a little flavor to what Bill's saying, if you go down to payment in the future instead of payment at closing, are you then going to have a different contract in place where you get additional juice or more compensation because you're not getting it now?
And I'm going to make things worse here. Because since Wednesday, I've been talking to high-producing agents out in the Pacific Northwest. Do you know certain agents actually increased their percentage of eggs? The really good, high-producing agents that can, and maybe it just thought of, maybe that's the reason they're doing it. Maybe there's a couple of deals that got left out at zero, and they're increasing that amount. But, you know, I talked to a dozen, 3 or 4 of them said, look, I'm charging more than I was before.
Well, if our client said, we're not going to pay you for the service, your hourly rate for the work you're doing now, we'll pay you 6 months from now, that would be a different level of compensation for our firm.
So these agents are doing my 3 things. They're doing their value prop, they're transparent, they're communicating, and they're saying, and they've built up the trust, and people actually paying them more money than what the national average. And the question I wanted to ask Bill before we get back to the folks online, both of you guys. So right now, I've got a for sale by owner, right? FSBO, that's what this is. The for sale by owner isn't paying my buyer's compensation agreement. I've got a buyer broker agreement with you. I've negotiated with the FSBO to put my percentage of eggs in there. It's in the contract. We put an addendum to the contract because I've done this before and I've gotten paid, right? And at the closing table, I get paid. How did that happen?
Well, we're, again, if it's a VAR contract or a FSBO contract, we're reviewing the contract and realizing.
It was a VAR. I put an addendum to the contract.
Right.
We increased.
Yeah, the terms are in the contract about, usually the FSBO says there's no realtor involved, so there's no commission due anybody. But if you've been involved in it and you're built in a commission, it'll be in the contract, and we at the closing table will know to stick that.
But these were lending situations, right? There, I was representing a buyer that was getting an FHA loan or whatever it was, and I think it ended up on the seller side of the CD, not necessarily. I don't.
When the CDs first started, a lot of lenders only wanted to see the buyer's CD.
Yes.
But now it's universal that they want to see both sides, both CDs, buyers and sellers.
Well, here's the thought. I mean, when it's a for sale by owner, you have to get an agreement with that seller before you actually show the house.
That's just one-time showing agreement. We've got it.
Maybe that's what you're going to have to do before you show houses. Is the seller has to sign off on that agreement that they're going to pay your commission.
Well, I am not going to show a house with a FSBO, and this is the.
No, but I'm talking about even one that's listed. You're going to have your seller sign this before I'm going to show your house.
Well, that's what this is. That's what this one-time showing document is.
I know, but it's usually for FSBOs. I'm saying you're going to have to go to the listing agent and say, hey, I want to show the house, but I'm not doing it until your seller says he's going to pay me.
But isn't that what got the industry into trouble in the first place?
No,
No.
It got in trouble because it was rolled into the MLS and nobody knew about this. This is now transparent, right? So I've been saying this on the show. We decoupled. It's no different than a FSBO. Bill is the listing agent. I'm going to show you Bill's house. I'm going to send this to Bill, who's the listing agent, and say, I will bring my client there. I need your client to sign this.
Exactly.
All right? And if they do, and it gets entered into the contract, then I think we're good.
Okay, devil's advocate. What if the seller will not sign it and the client still wants to see the house?
Then I go back to my buyer because I got a buyer broker agreement and say, okay, buyer.
You're now compensating me out of pocket.
So we're going to be requiring every seller before a house gets shown to sign this agreement. I mean, that's crazy.
That is crazy.
I know it's crazy. But,
that's crazy. That drowns the seller's representation in paperwork.
I don't disagree with any of that. The point is, how are we going to do it, Coach? Right?
Well, you said it was a FSBO. We're back off the FSBOs.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but at the end of the day, once it's decoupled,
Yep.
right? It's, to my opinion, it doesn't look any different than that because we do not have in the MLS that. So I've got to pick up the phone. I've got to call Bill. That's back to my communication skills and say, Bill, I've got a client. I want to bring the client over to you. What is your seller offering for compensation? And Bill's going to say X number of eggs. And then I'm going to say, great, sign this document saying the seller's going to pay me this much of eggs. Then I'm going to go back to my buyer. And then I'm going to say, buyer, this is how this has worked out. This is just going to be a lot of communication.
A lot of forms, a lot of DocuSign's going to make a lot of money now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or transaction desk, which is
Or whoever you use.
But so if I'm selling my house and I tell my listing agent, hey, I want to offer whatever percent, however many eggs, to
Thank you for keeping me out of trouble.
To the selling realtor, they can't. There's no way for them to actually advertise that, is there?
And no, it cannot be in the MLS.
Right.
They can do what they want outside of the MLS.
But it can be communicated via
It could
phone, text, email.
It could be communicated, right?
Okay.
I had a meeting on Monday with a national builder asking my opinion on this from their perspective. And they wanted to put across their website offering X eggs to realtors. And my suggestion was not to do that.
Yeah.
My suggestion was to create a tab that realtors can look into it, and then this way you capture their information and so forth and so on in it on the end of it, because I think then it becomes a big issue for them.
So Keith, if you're the listing agent, are you going to, on your website, have a tab so that if I want to show you one of your houses,
What you
I
don't
can...
know is that's a conversation I'm going to have with Mr. Miller this afternoon.
Okay.
Right? Does that make sense? Is that a solution to this, right?
Well, how you could build it, you could build it on the website where you have a schedule and showing tab where it's already integrated into the website. You could do an offshoot of that schedule
But you
and
can't connect to
showing tab
IDX.
by having that.
You can't connect to IDX.
It doesn't have to be through IDX because you could use a showing scheduler that's not connected to IDX. That's a third-party calendar system.
Okay.
That's not IDX connection.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying
This is
to
a mess.
Yeah.
This is what
This
we're
is a
trying.
mess.
Yeah.
This is what I've been trying to do on the show since it happened. Look, we knew it was going to. I've been following this intimately since 2019. I've read. I think I might be able to get a law degree. I don't know. I've read as much briefs and stuff like that since that. I knew for sure since September it was going to happen, right? That we were going to decouple. It was a matter of when that was going to happen. And what I'm trying to do here is kind of vet through this. What can we do as a community to move forward? You were thinking something, Bill, and
Well, I was going to actually create another problem if you want it.
Thanks, Bill.
And I don't know if
We're
y'all...
trying to take them away, not add.
Well, you know, if you're going to have, according to the Pacific, the 6% seems to have survived, even though it's survived in a different
Yeah,
format.
well, we got to be careful. We're not supposed
Or
to talk
more.
about that,
Right.
but I want.
He can talk about it.
Yeah, I want to.
6 eggs of...
I want to debunk
I don't
that.
understand why can't say.
I want to debunk that. It is not. It is not right. You do that. You see these more than anybody. What's the average? We're not even close to that average out there.
Yeah.
It's in
I
the 5
see
range.
fives.
Yeah.
I see 5.5. I see
my
6.
my point being that the commission structure hasn't, what ends up in the transaction, what ends up in the purchase price is still a large commission.
It's a number, whatever
Yeah.
that number is.
If we truly do decoupling and all of a sudden...
Well, it's going to happen.
Well, I know, but
a lot of money.
but if the result is that the seller says, I'm only going to pay my broker 3%, and buyer, you got to deal with your own agent.
What's going to happen?
Well, what we haven't talked about is appraisals. You're going to have a whole group of houses selling with a 6% commission because that seller says, I'll pay the 6% because I want to get my house sold. And you're going to have a lot of same houses, that same subdivision, same model house with a 3% commission. All of a sudden, you got some appraisal and comp problems.
Woody Fincham is going to be sitting in your
Great,
seat.
great point of conversation right there.
Woody's going to be sitting in your seat on the 3rd of April. He's actually teaching a class at Carr right now, probably about this very topic. But he's going to be sitting in that very seat on Wednesday to talk about what that is and what I've heard from the Appraisal Institute and different folks, much similar to what Ricardo said. You know, we're still trying to figure this out. We're not ready to publicly talk about this on what that's going to do. Everybody's kind of waiting for somebody else to do something, right? Which is never a good sign or never a good thing.
Comments are coming in fast. Katie, you want to go with that thought, and I'll relay some of the realtor comments?
My thought is that if you are selling your house and you are only going to pay the listing agent's commission, so you're getting X number of eggs off. So you're only paying half the eggs. So then what's going to happen is that then that buyer is going to ask for closing costs when maybe they wouldn't have because they're trying to cover their realtor's costs. So at the end of the day, you as a seller are still paying the same thing.
You're saying it evens out in the wash.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a real world example to that, but let's see if Bill wants to jump in and see if anybody.
I got a lot. Yeah, Bill, you want to
No, go ahead. Let's get some
So
comments.
agents, let's go to the agents here. This is from Carly Wagner, also an engineer. She says, this opens up another can of worms. Listing agents are no longer required to promise the same commission to every seller's agent. And she also says, I believe the settlement also says that associations cannot endorse or support any type of third-party organized platform that advertises commissions. Okay, so you cannot use Showtime Scheduler for that, is what she's saying.
Yeah, I've read it intently. It cannot be connected to the MLS any way, shape, or form. That doesn't mean that I can't create a website. It's no different than Facebook.
A page on the website.
Page on, and put my own information
Right.
on that, as long as I've got permission from my seller to go ahead and
And
do
we
it.
could easily build that into the
And
website.
that cannot be connected in any way, shape, or form
To the MLS.
to the MLS.
Or IDX or any other.
IDX or anything like that.
Paragon.
So she's spot on that point. But there can be a separate standalone. It's no different than I send a postcard out and say, hey, whatever.
Sarah Hill Buchensky, she's a realtor. What if the seller wants to pay different commission amounts to different buyers' agents?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if you can do that. I'm not sure if that's discriminatory.
What if the seller wants to pay different commission amounts to different buyers' agents? Why would that be
Why would
discriminatory?
They
Why is
li-
that just not business?
What about if they had a realtor they just don't like because they had a bad experience and it's zero
No,
commission to with you?
I'm sorry, if somebody's selling my house, I'm gonna pay them what.
Well, I'm going to stay away from that because that's a Donna Patton fair housing question. That is, I just tell you, if anybody wants to do that, that is a slippery slope because you didn't want to sell it to me because I'm a white male or
Yeah,
whatever.
no.
Yeah, that is, man, ooh, I think that's a
You
bit of a
you don't think it
slippery
would be
slope.
okay, redheads get 3% and blondes get 2%?
How about gray hair? Or about no hair? Or no hair on that. Yeah.
Well, one thing that I
It's an interesting question, but man.
Sure, there's so many questions and there's so many issues we're going to deal with. The good news is in our community, we've got a lot of experienced realtors, experienced settlement companies, experienced attorneys, the lenders, experienced lenders. We're going to figure it out and work it out. It seems like the end of the world is happening on July.
It's because of all this clickbait and all this stuff that's out there, and my 80-some-odd-year-old mother calls me up and says, "Are you going to be okay?" And
Do you think the Russians have done this?
Right before the election.
well, I stay away from the big politics. I don't think
That was
our
a joke
Politics and
from Tucker.
religion.
I don't think
Yeah,
our,
sorry.
I don't think our president did as much good
joke.
at this. But anyway,
But again, when we had all the regulation changes with like the latest with CDs and before that, about 5 years
but it
before
never
that.
hit
there-
CNN. It never hit Fox.
Well,
it
that's
never
true.
hit- never
But
hit
it
that stuff.
upended the industry and we worked through it and we made it happen. I think the thing is for everybody to keep their cool and just say, we're going to have problems. We just need to work together with the solutions.
Don't you think we're going to have a little bit of an exit of people in my profession here?
Oh, sure.
I think so. I think the ones that don't
Do transactions.
see it as truly a career, people who are just kind of dabbling.
The hobbyists.
You're going to lose those.
Well, the costs are going to go up, right?
Mm-hmm.
This $418 million is going to
But
get paid
the
somehow.
good news on that
Right.
is that then you're going to be left with the ones who really do see it as a career, and they are not going to allow one of their counterparts to be done out of a commission because they don't want to be on the other end of that.
I think the rules and regulations are going to be implemented way more now than before because there's just a market pressure to go ahead and do this, which raises our professionalism. I've done this before. I'll continue to give a shout out to Michael Guthrie. 5:30 in the morning on my phone says, "Be professional, be caring, and be trustworthy." That came from him many years ago. It's on the bottom of my email signature.
Do you think realtors are going to say, I would prefer to be the listing agent than the selling
So
agent?
I actually think this is harder on the listing agent than
You do?
on the buyer's
Well, the
agent.
listing agent, more so than ever, has to explain the value proposition for a buyer's agent to their client. And I think
Right.
that's the biggest issue here, is
Well-
if you have listing agents not explaining to their clients the opportunity or the val prop that buyer's representation provides here, then you have an issue.
Number one is val prop. If you can't explain your val prop,
Well, and I have friends who don't understand when they list their property with someone that they'll be like, well, my agent hasn't even shown my house. Well, that's not their job. Their job is to get other agents who are working with buyers to show your house. That's their
But
job.
here's the downside to that. Not the downside, but that means that listing agent didn't explain
Right.
their value proposition, what
Which I
they
think
do.
happens.
So,
But I think they're going to have to get better at that.
so the conversations I've been having out in the Pacific Northwest, that's exactly what happened. There was a settle. There was this time of period where it was a little goofy. There was a settlement in, the cream raised to the top, right? And that's when I was shocked. They would say, yeah, I've actually increased my price for two reasons. I'm doing a lot more work, and if I got to work with somebody on the other side that doesn't know what they're doing, I want to get paid for it.
True.
And I put me on my heels. Now, it wasn't a ton of them, but it was enough of them to go, whoa. And when I started looking at their volume, I went, okay, that makes sense.
Richard, watching the program, says you guys should go down the road that Bill was leading when he talked about appraisals in the neighborhood, with some homes offering 3% or a percentage to buyer's representation and others not, and how those homes that will not have buyer's representation commission will stay longer or be staler on the market than those that are offering it, which will obviously turn quicker, and the impact that's going to have on appraisals and lending.
Well, I remember years ago, and I've been doing this for quite some time, that it used to show on the appraisal, it used to have some line item about whether closing costs were paid or whatever back eons ago.
This is
I'm
before
gonna
the
say,
time of great unpleasantness. This was before 2005.
yeah,
and
this
6
was
or
like
something.
in the 80s, 90s era, I'm going to say. And I also
You were a
was in
little
South
girl.
Carolina.
You were just a little girl.
About
then.
this,
Yes, I was only
You stole
12.
my thunder. I said, you weren't even born then.
Right. I'd love to say that. But there used to be something where you could compare whether, there were closing costs paid off of that sales price. You could see it.
So-
And now you can't.
So that person who chimed in, I'm inviting them back on the 3rd because
Yep.
I'm going to have Woody Fincham here, and I'm working on trying to bring a lender in there. So any lenders that are listening to this, if you want to sit in either one of these chairs on the 3rd, please reach out to me. But that's the conversation we're going to have on the 3rd between an appraiser and a lender, and say, okay, let's talk about this from their perspective. Anything else before I jump in?
Well, Bill, do you want to touch, because you brought this up, the appraisal?
Well,
Because that's going to be something that comes up.
I think it's definitely going to be a potential issue. I think eventually the market will absorb the fact that there are these two different prices.
Well, I think the runway that we have between now and July, that's where my hope is all these discussions are happening to clean up the contract, to clean up the buyer broker, whatever documentation that needs to get cleaned up so this runs smoother on July 1 or whatever date it is, to include the regulatory side, right? Because the appraisers are also regulated, right? They have rules that they must follow.
Yep. And here's something for all you realtors out there, because we see it now. The contract was VAR contract was revised in, I can't remember what, March or 2023, and it's had a recent revision this year. We are amazed in my office how many contracts we're getting with the old 2023 form. So for all you realtors out there, once this last version gets created, make sure you get rid of all your old contracts and only use the new version. Otherwise, we'll have another mess.
Well, and it gets even more complicated because of we're data sharing now with Bright, and we see Northern Virginia contracts all the time, Richmond contracts. So each region has their
Lynchburg
own
has their
different
own.
version of this contract. I'm not so sure there's going to be one uniform contract for the whole.
Their state has about 6 different
That's
regional
exactly
forms. What I tell all realtors when they come to me and ask me, I just got the Northern Virginia offer and I'm going to counter, and can you tell me what these clauses mean and these clauses? I said, nope, what you need to do is counter offer on our VAR form. Never accept an out of the area form, because we know what it means. We don't need to try to decipher what the Northern Virginia form is.
But if
maybe-
you aren't gonna counter, if you're just gonna accept,
No,
then you got a problem.
No, you counter it on our form with the same language.
Yeah, well, I'll push back on that a little bit, because it becomes a situation where we're trying to do the best interest of our client. I agree 100%. If you're not.
Well, that isn't the best interest of the client because the representation knows that contract the best. That's what he's saying.
Absolutely. So the thing is back to value proposition and be a professional, right? Start learning these contracts, these different contracts.
Well, are you going to know the difference between, this is a
I
perfect
can't read,
example.
Bill, so-
No, you can't. I know
why
you
it's
can,
Yonna.
Keith Smith.
I can't read things.
So
Does it
the-
got pictures in it? I'm good.
Let's talk
Got
about.
a picture of a house? I'm good. We're doing that? Okay.
The settlement date. In our VAR form, the settlement date is on or about
Yeah.
a certain day. In Northern Virginia, it's on a date, and later on in the contract, it says time is of the essence. That is a significant difference with all kind of legal
We're gonna save
ramifications.
this personal
That's another
debate
one.
for a different show that you and I can kind of talk about this.
Anyway, counter offer on our form.
Listen to Bill.
Comments coming in fast. Sarah says realtors are a persistent and resilient bunch.
Yeah.
We will figure this out and keep helping our clients.
Yeah.
But there definitely are going to be unintended consequences with all of this.
There
Carly
always
says this, buyers agents should not be steering their buyers based on commissions. The value of a home should be independent from agents' commissions. That's how things should work to be ethical. However, we all know in practice that is not what is happening or how it shakes out. This question's coming in. Does anyone envision, and this might be a question for a lender, I think we all know the answer to this, but we're not lenders. Does anyone envision the commission being part of the financing process? Taylor West and Suzanne Hess giving Katie some props right now. Who wants to handle that one? I don't see how that could possibly happen. The commission compensation being part of a 30-year or 15-year mortgage instrument. There's not a lender that's going to finance commissions.
Oh, no, no.
Yeah,
No,
that was the question I was
yeah,
asked.
no, it's either going to get paid at settlement or.
Yeah,
or not.
but in essence, they are financing it when, let's say you've got
Yeah.
a loan for 200,000, the commission's 10,
Yeah.
and now we're allowed to include that 10,000 in the loan. So it is being financed, it's
So
just
not-
being paid at closing.
Right.
So, we've got a couple listings coming up. We're very fortunate. And this conversation has been happening, right? And the conversation has been happening about, well, what should I do? We're trusted advisors. They trust Yonna and I. Okay, they trust Yonna. But they trust Yonna and I, right, to go ahead and do this and have this conversation. And we kind of turned the conversation around. And this one that I'm thinking of is actually a business owner. And I said, look, you know what?
Bill Hamrick says not a chance that'll happen for the person asking that question.
Yeah. I said, okay, great. We can do this. We can have our side of the equation, and we can say the other side of the equation is zero. Right? We can do this. We've been allowed to do this in CAR for some months now. Right? I think since the beginning of the year. I have it wrong, but that's actually allowed right now to happen on that end of it. And I said, so. Then he asked me, so, like literally, the guy goes, well, will anybody see my house? I said, well, that's the question, right? So the question is, I have a buyer-broker agreement with Katie, right? I know I'm going to get paid because I've done my job. I got my buyer broker on that, but Katie's looking at Bill's house and Jerry's house, and they're both the same house, and Bill's paying and Jerry's not. Which house they're going to go and see? They're going to go see Bill's house because they're not going to have to write another check at closing. And this guy said, yeah, it's just, you're absolutely right.
Well, you highlighted was it on Wednesday's show or this past Friday's show? There was two incoming soon that came with no buyer's representation commission.
One was zero and one was some dollar amount.
And they immediately changed.
Because they got that very phone call, right? And so to I think it was Carly's comment, it wasn't the agent saying, I'm not going to go see this, because I communicated to my buyer and I said, look, if we're going to go see Jerry's house, our buyer, I want to reiterate our communication. If we do this, you're going to have to pay per our agreement.
Or the buyer can amend the buyer representation contract and say, I still want to see this house. This house is not included in the contract.
But I've
I'm
got
going
to
to go represent myself on this.
And then I've got to agree to that.
Right. But if your client says, I want to see this house, you're going to agree to that because you know that there's a chance they're not going to buy this. They might buy something else, and you still want to keep the contract active.
It depends on my relationship with the buyer. I might turn around and say, well, then I'm not going to sign this, right? So we've now got a problem, right? I'm not going to let you out. You're not going to let me out. I mean,
that's not a good position for the realtor.
I negotiate for a living. I mean, we could, I'm just saying there's multiple options to that. I can also make a business decision to go ahead and say, okay, fine, I'm going to amend this. You go ahead.
That's what's probably going to happen.
You can go ahead and do that, and you come back and ask me for your help. Then I'm going to say, sign this, and then you're going to owe me this amount of money.
Well, I just bought a house in South Carolina, and I can tell you that if, for any reason, the seller was not paying the commission to my buyer's agent, I saw how hard she worked. There's no way she's not getting paid, one way or another.
Yeah. Look, again, looking into the Pacific Northwest, this really didn't change anything. It weeded out the people that couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. The people that could do it got compensated. Some cases they got compensated more. It rolled into the contract. I don't know how they worked through the lending side of it, the appraisal side of it. Those questions I didn't ask. But business continued along.
Another banker, another lender, in response to the commission being part of the instrument, the 30-year, the 15-year instrument. This is from Ricardo, who's responding to Bill and responding to us as a panel. So this is what I love about the show. We got 15 Facebook pages currently airing this program, and they're all responding on different pages to each other. Ricardo Cruz Duran says, hard to picture, however, it can be placed in a different section. Say from commissions to seller concessions, then we would be able to finance. Buyer pay the real estate agent, and the seller adds the seller concessions to offset the cash to require it to close. It's just a workaround, but it's possible.
I am confident that the regulators will get this nailed down before, because it probably won't impact the middle to the upper side of the market, right? If you're buying a $1 million+ house, you may or may not have that cash. It is going to impact whatever level of entry level we've got.
The unfortunate thing is this impacts the early stage, the first-time home buyer, and early stage buyer the most, which stinks about this. And they're the ones that are already feeling the headwinds and hardship because of interest rates, tight inventory, and escalating values. This is another headwind that they have to navate.
Bill's going to find out about this. We're reselling our first. Did you talk to Kristen yesterday?
I talked to everybody.
Got it. We're reselling one of our land trust homes, and we will be putting in a buyer broker thing in it because we want to motivate the real estate community to come and take a look at it. That's what we're going to do. It's a little bit of a discounted rate, but we're going to be offering about. I just really don't think this is going away. I think the end result is. We are now transparent. We are now negotiating. I have to negotiate as a buyer's agent my commission. And I've said this on the show, and I've got in trouble with it, got in trouble for it. But if I can't negotiate with Katie for how I get paid, how the hell am I going to negotiate your money? Because that's what we do for a living, is negotiate. So if I'm not good enough to negotiate my own money, what the hell am I going to do with yours?
Yeah.
Right?
Carly pushing back a little bit on you here, Keith, and we should get Carly on the show. Carly's fantastic. She makes the shows better. She says, perhaps sellers can opt to only accept contracts on standard VAR contracts, but then the next legal suit will be over the use of these forms and if they can be protected by copywriting, similar to the building codes, which now must be free to the public.
Yeah.
She says each contract can be unique. No legal doctrine says that a standard contract must be used. VAR copyrights their contract, and as we see more buyers without realtor representation, we will see more contracts and lawyers that need to review them to protect their clients, as realtors are not allowed to practice law in terms of reviewing contract language.
So where her and I diverge is realtors will continue to be in it. It'll just be less realtors in the space. And the ones that are pros are just going to float up to the top. But to the point, there will have to be contract changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, we see contracts that somebody's lawyer has written that are not a standard contract all the time. We see contracts that two people have written between themselves.
On a napkin.
On a napkin, pretty much. And, so you're never going to have that every contract is exactly the same, because it just doesn't happen that way.
So back to I'm thinking about some of your conversation, back to your point, and a very dear friend and a smart guy told me this once. I'm not going to step over, pennies to pick up dollars, right? Mm-hmm. So what has happened with this particular case, the guy said, look, I want to offer.
Well, you should step over pennies to pick up dollars.
Yeah, you don't want to step over
got it
dollars
backwards.
to pick up
I got it
pennies.
backwards.
We knew what you were saying.
I would prefer to step over.
So that's my dyslexia kicking in.
You don't want to step over dollars to pick up nickels.
I knew what you were saying.
Yeah.
I just wasn't going to correct
thank
it.
you for
but
correcting
Jerry
me.
is.
Yeah. Well, his job is to keep Smith from doing stupid stuff. So, and I tend to do it on my own very easily. So, look, we're getting close to our wrap up time here, and
we got a lot of comments here. This is from a commercial broker, does residential as well. He's actually doing it, I think, in 2 states now. Scott Thorpe is doing it here, and is it Maryland as well, Scott? He says, will the MLS allow, quote, bonus, quote, statement to selling agent and agent notes with the new rules? For example, $10,000 bonus to selling agent?
Try that a little bit slower.
So he says, will the MLS allow, he has it in air quotes, bonus.
No, so anything to dollars and compensation at all will not be in the MLS, period, end of story. Now, that doesn't mean I can't negotiate it. You mentioned commercial, VAR has a commercial contract. It's page 5 of 10, number 11. There's a paragraph about how agents get paid. That's ultimately what's going to end up in the contract,
Yep.
right? And that's how it's going to go. Those of us have been around the boat long enough that remember the time of great unpleasantness, that we're trying to sell something. What was sellers doing?
They were offering more X.
They
Yes.
were offering, the kitchen sink and a Ferrari. If you come
The cars in the garage stay.
Remember that?
I do remember that.
I remember builders literally having a car in their house that if you buy the house, you get the car.
You get the car.
So this pendulum at some point is going to swing. I think it's a long way out. I think we're 5 or 10 years out before this inventory pendulum goes anywhere close to switching from a seller's market to a buyer's market. That doesn't mean individual micro markets might be there, but as an overall, we've got a long way to go. I think that needle's moving a little bit, but I mean, it's just a scotch on that end.
Cameron Wells Marsh, she says, nothing but respect for Tucker. Great seeing him on air. She's watching the program right now.
Hi, Cameron.
The show is on fire right now. Keith, do you want anything else on the mind? You want me to get to
No.
more
We're over the allotted time, but I'll follow your lead on questions.
How about this one? This is from a real estate investor. For Katie and Tucker, any other concerns that we have not covered that you think should be something we should be mindful of?
I think there's enough out there that we've already talked about that we're all anticipating is going to be a problem. I'm sure there are other issues that we're going to deal with. But again, I just go back to the fact that this community will work together and we'll figure out how to do this. It may take, you may want to have a more experienced settlement company or an attorney involved in your closing. I guess that's a commercial. But
Which one do you suggest, Bill?
I know which one I suggest.
You can say it. You're allowed to say it.
Absolutely.
Say it.
Well, you can.
unfortunately,
You're on the partner tab. You can go ahead and say it.
I like both of them because I happen to have an interest in Charlottesville Settlement Company, but I compete with them too. But
How does that work when Katie actually shuts your phone off when you hand the phone? How does that actually work?
When we started,
We help each other.
when we started Charlottesville Settlement,
just
we would
teasing
go
you.
out, Katie and I, and talk to realtors about the Charlottesville Settlement and what services it offered, and then I would sit there and I would say, but I happen to compete with them, and I think you should always use an attorney for a closing. And Katie
And I
used
would
to
always say,
cringe.
no, you shouldn't.
Shannon Dagner giving you guys some props. Tom Poole giving you guys some props here. I mean, I see 8 different firms on the show. I mean, how many real estate firms are in? I mean, 8's quite a bit here. You got a slide to close her down here. That
I
you
don't
can
have a
put on
slide to
screen?
close it down, but if you don't mind putting that up, and I handed this to everybody. Thank you, Judah. So since the announcement of the settlement on March 15th, every day I look at what comes on the market active, and I just take a look at who's offering 3 eggs, 2.7 eggs, 2.5, 2.2, or 2 eggs, right? And the total number of listings. So, and I want to track that. I'm tracking that between now and July 1, right? To see what really is happening with the percentage of eggs that are being offered. And I can tell you in the 2-week period, because we're exactly 2 weeks away from the announcement, 67% of the 173 new listings in the car footprint are offering 3 eggs. The next closest is 2.5 eggs, back to your 5%. You've been talking 5 eggs you've been talking about, is at 25%. There is nothing that's been posted since the 15th that is below 2 eggs. So out in Pacific Northwest, how they track this, I was asked this question the other day, how they track this in their MLS, in the back end of their MLS, they're requiring agents to put in commission structures, not to the public, it's only available to the agents to see what it is. They're averaging 2.51% of an egg. And I think that's where we're gonna, the market is going to adjust itself, but but when we get here on July 1, before it goes away, I'm really curious to see what the average is going to be.
Fantastic program, guys. For all those that made the program better by offering commentary and questions for the panel, thank you kindly. It's a holiday weekend for all those that celebrate. Enjoy it with friends and family. Keith Smith, fantastic panel for you. Thank you kindly for putting this together.
I need to get out of here and go do Stations of the Cross at 12 o'clock.
RealTalkWithKeithSmith.com, the website. Click the partner tab, and you will see the trusted advisors that you can count on to get you to closing and beyond in real estate. RealTalkWithKeithSmith.com, the partners tab. For Judah Wickhauer, who handles everything behind the scenes, the Elmer's glue of this operation. Thank you, Judah Wickhauer. This is the program. Find it online or wherever you get your podcasting content. So long, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Well done.
All right.
Thank you.